My dear friends, in many of our human affairs there are contested truths. We can see that playing out in stark form at the moment in the United States following their elections last week. What I'd like to draw attention to is the framework that is employed to judge whether something is true or not. That is, what are the standards of truth being employed? Often, when there is passionate disagreement between two sides, it's because there is an unknown and unacknowledged difference in those frameworks. It's as if you have two people watching different movies on the same screen. The evidence is the same, but the evidence is interpreted in a completely different way. Part of what it means to come to a mature judgment is simply an acknowledgement of what standard of truth is being used to assess evidence. Which brings me to the book of Genesis, and most especially the first 13 chapters, which are what we shall be exploring together in our house group over the next few months. In my life, I've often come across the argument that the stories in the Bible aren't true, that they're made up, and that we can do without them. When these claims are made, they're normally based upon particular standards of truth, either of science or of history. Now, these are not the appropriate standards to bring to bear when considering the truth of the early stories in Genesis. Genesis is not a scientific text, nor is it a straightforward text of history in the way that we understand that term today. The early stories of Genesis are mythological, and they belong to that genre of literature. The Bible contains many different genres of literature. It contains history, poetry, songs, ethical instruction, all sorts of things, and it includes mythology. To call something mythological is not to say that it is untrue. It is to say that it contains truth of a certain sort. Most especially, what we shall be looking at with these stories from Genesis are two sorts of truth. That they tell us truths about our relationship with God, and they tell us truths about our relationships with each other, our human nature. So what we shall do each week, taking our time with them, is looking at each story and asking, what is the truth that these foundational stories have for us? The longer that I've studied them, the more I am convinced that these are some of the truest stories that we have in Scripture, and they are incredibly precious. So I look forward to our continuing conversations.